Morning, everybody. It's good to see you on this classic fall day. Um, yeah, what a lovely way to start the morning. Little two leaves talking and then some more leaves talking here. So that was incredible. Yeah, what a strange day to gather. Really, I have been doing teachings when I used to be a pastor at a big church and been giving public talks for a long time, and it seems like every few months now, something happens in the world or in the news that dislodges all of us, really, disorients us. And today is one of those days with what was going on in Pittsburgh and at the Tree of Life Synagogue. And I guess I feel like I want to acknowledge that. I mean, it's what a strange thing that we're gathering here, a group of people. In some ways, it's wildly countercultural to gather as a community, as a somewhat like-minded community, a spiritual community, a spiritual-ish community, we could say. It's wildly countercultural and needed in the world. And it's also terribly sad to acknowledge that we live in a world where that's not always safe. And I'm talking about America, not some other place. So, and so many people, some of you actually yourselves and your parents, and my parents certainly. My dad immigrated to the United States when he was 14. He came over and landed on Ellis Island. He didn't become a citizen until he was in his 40s, I think. So many stories, and so many of you and your parents or grandparents came here in some ways seeking a better life, we might say, but in some ways because of the possibility of living in a place where you could follow your own religious or spiritual longings. It was a safe enough place to gather the way you wanted to gather. And so it's so terribly disheartening when we realize that even in our country that's not always possible. So I want to begin this morning with just a brief moment of silence for our Jewish brothers and sisters. And then I'm going to read a little something and then we'll jump into the rest of the teaching. So just join me for just a brief moment of silence. Now let me read from one of my favorite passages from the Talmud. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work. You're not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. It's interesting, my own relationship with Judaism and is, in some respects, was the opening to a larger worldview for me. When I first heard that Jesus was Jewish, that was like news. Oh, he was? I thought he was like the first Christian or something. And that cracked a little door open for me and eventually just blew up my worldview, really. And if you know a little of my story, I lived in Israel for a few years, and so I moved from like Chaim Potok novels to living in Jerusalem into the nonfiction realm. And yeah, so in some ways I'm just so deeply grateful to my Jewish friends and the way in which Judaism expanded my own view of the world and my own spirituality. And I would not be the same had I not stumbled into this territory. So anyway, it's moving to me to hear the Talmud like that, this ancient 1,500-year-old document, 1,600-year-old document, still with so much to teach. And so anyway, yeah, how are we going to talk about the human shadow? And how might we move into this territory? Today was the little Bambi adventure, and the music was opening up for us what I called last week the West facet of wholeness, the facet of imagination, where two leaves talk. It's part of our human wholeness. It's part of our own capacity, our own human capacity for wholeness and magnificence, the deeply imaginative. And you remember that poem I once read here? The only war that matters is the war against imagination. Yes, and right now it's a full onslaught. The news is a full onslaught, and the war against against imagination in some respects. So it's lovely to be here this morning and to be reminded of our imaginative capacities and our way of knowing the world. And in the West facet of wholeness, which I hope you're getting a sense for the map, I want to do one more week on it, and then we'll return to it when we're more deeply in the winter months. But each facet of wholeness, as I sort of have given you as a drive-through version of them, has an underdeveloped side. And the underdeveloped side of the West imaginative muse is the shadow. And I want to talk about the shadow. You have a shadow. And if you deny that you have a shadow, that's proof that you have a shadow. So you can't get out of it. And it's very important. In fact, Ken Wilber, who I regularly refer to, philosopher, says the greatest gift of psychotherapy and depth psychology in the 21st century has to do with shadow work. It's the great invitation. And he even says, goes further, it's the point of psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, psychology, to probe around in these elements of ourselves that are unowned or disowned. So it's an incredible opportunity for deeper integration. Here's the problem. I'm going to give you the problem right now by defining shadow. Shadow is what we don't know about ourselves. So that could be the end of my talk. Just, okay, fine. What we don't know about ourselves. And let me make it even stronger. It's what we don't know about ourselves, and if accused, we would deny. Have you ever adamantly denied? I mean, sincerely and adamantly denied, that's definitely not a part of. That's definitely not like that. We might say. So, how do you talk about that? Or do you just leave it in the shadow? And is the shadow good? Is it bad? Is it evil? Is it dark? What would be the good in rummaging around in territory in disowned or unowned parts of ourselves? That seems like dangerous work, and it is. That's why it's in the shadow. So how would we even begin a conversation like this? And the reason why I wanted to do it this week is because we are about to celebrate Halloween, which is a way that we can express our collective and hidden shadows. It is. How did we come up with that? We didn't. The unconscious came up with it. We needed an outlet. And Halloween happens to be a culturally accepted outlet. Because think about how literally insane it is. All right, kids, I got an idea. Okay. When the days are starting to get real short, I got an idea. Let's dress up. Okay, let's dress up. How should we dress up? Okay, I'm thinking dress up like murderers. That's a good idea. dress up like dragons. That's a good idea. Maybe one of the kids, you should pretend not to have an arm. That would be awesome. How about zombies and monsters? Oh, demons. Let's go full Satan. Great idea. And then not only will we dress up, I got a better idea. Let's wait for the sun to go down, and then let's walk around the neighborhood. Let's actually go to a neighborhood that we would not ordinarily let you walk around in. Never. Let's go there, and then, oh, wait, I know how to make it better. Let's knock on strangers' doors and expect candy. This is an insane idea. And we all think, oh, that's great. It's a multi-million-dollar business. And as adults, let's also dress up. Who wants to be a prostitute? Anyone? You know? That's Halloween, and somehow we're okay with this. It's a way for our collective, this is Kent Dobson's reading of it, our collective unconscious to kind of leak out sideways. Why would we want to do this? And I grew up in a fundamentalist culture that didn't like Halloween. In fact, we were kind of split. Some people allowed Halloween. My parents did, sort of. Others did not. Adamantly and sincerely repressed, denied, and shamed anyone for doing any Halloween. And I was told as a kid that if you lit a jack-o'-lantern and put it on your porch, it would attract demons. So I was like scared as a child. Okay? Didn't want to go anywhere. Now they have trunk or treat. Let's all get together at a church where it's safe and we'll pop over in our trucks. Which is also a weird idea. Hey, kids, let's dress up and go near the trunk of a car. Sounds like a idea. But anyway, I grew up with a lot of fear around Halloween and demons. And in fundamentalist culture, Christian fundamentalism, demons are quite real. They're not like symbolic. Like you might be sophisticated or whatever, but maybe you're not. But they were like, no, really, they're going to be on the porch, and Satan might be there, and you might be tempted, and they might attack you, and so better stay home and pray because that'll work. If there were demons that were going to attack you, you wouldn't think they would need a jack-o'-lantern to do it. I've been waiting all year. And just now as I'm thinking of it, I'm not even saying this is necessarily a bad thing, Halloween, I'm definitely not. And I'm also not necessarily saying it's a really bad thing to be afraid of it. I'm just saying the reason why it's sort of sticky territory is because it's shadowy territory. We're not sure what to do with it. We're not sure what to do with the unowned and disowned elements of ourselves, like the zombie of us and the prostitute that's in there and the murderer. We're not sure what to do with that. And we're pretty sure we don't have any of that. Okay, so now we know we're in the territory of the shadow. So what do I want to say? Oh my gosh, look at the time. Okay, I'm going to give you, quickly, I want to talk about the shadow, and then I'm going to give you a line from Jesus, so why not? So let me try to more fully define what I mean by shadow. Oh, by the way, I asked some of you to dress up, and I see like one of you dressed up. I wasn't here last week, so I couldn't really push the idea. I dressed up. I have my I Love TS shirt on, Taylor Swift, okay? My daughter's going to be Taylor Swift for Halloween, so I'm supporting her. And also I'm supporting Taylor Swift, and you'll see why in a minute. So the shadow, again, is what we don't know about ourselves. And if accused, we would deny. And the shadow can either, in Jungian terms, be golden or sinister. It's not necessarily bad. Golden shadow or sinister shadow. What's a golden shadow? Taylor Swift. She is the most awesome, vibrant, culturally relevant, beautiful. I'm not saying I actually believe these things, but maybe I do. It's a public figure often, or just anyone in your life, on which you put all kinds of golden things. There's no way I could be like Taylor Swift. It's a way of saying, I'm definitely not like that. And it gives a place for that energy to roam around. Same with a sinister shadow. There is no way I could be like certain public figures. There's no way my hair is that bad. So golden or sinister, now that's a public territory, but it gets a lot more closer to home when it's happening in your work environment. Okay? And later on, I'll give you some clues for how to track down shadow, like not find it, but just to get on the trail. But I'll sort of leave that out. But golden or sinister. And that's the realm of projections, by the way. That's the technical term for it. And by the way, my circles are a bit weird. Now people are like, projection has become almost something that people talk about, like, oh, so-and-so is projecting, or you're projecting, or projection is a good thing. Marie-Louise von Franz, this is one of Jung's students and eventually colleagues, she said if we didn't project, it would never come out. So if someone's like, you're projecting, why, thank you. How else is what I don't know about myself going to come out? So we project onto other people, onto bosses, onto kids, onto our own children, onto our spouses, because the disowned parts of ourselves need a little place to roam around before we can own them back. So when you hear shadow, don't necessarily think bad. Let it roam around on Taylor Swift for a while before you start discovering what creative thing are you not bringing forth in the world. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so projection is not bad. What else do I want to say? How did the shadow get formed? I'm kind of going really fast. It got formed because when you were a little kid, there were parts of your wild self, your full-faceted self, that was not acceptable to you, and especially not to your parents or culture. And so it had to keep you safe, go into the dungeon. It could be your exuberance, your wild, creative, free-flowing, tree climbing. Maybe you talk to leaves, and this was not acceptable eventually to you, but especially to your caregivers. It went into the shadow. And you forgot all about it. You actually did not think to yourself, I'm suppressing something. You actually just forgot about it over time. Same with sinister. Let's say, like in my house, it was the one thing you couldn't be was angry. You couldn't be angry. Almost anything else was acceptable, but you couldn't be angry because that was, can you imagine Jesus getting angry? Actually, there are stories about that, but don't be like, because that's super bad. So if I was angry, which, do you ever get angry as a kid? It's a totally natural human emotion. Goes into the dungeon. And you start saying, the one thing I know about myself is there's not an angry bone in my body. Until at Starbucks, you smash your latte on the table and you think, you're so mad at the barista because it's not hot enough. Where did that come from? And I don't mean that's what you normally do and you're trying to hide it. I mean, all of a sudden, out of the blue, something comes out and boom. Where did that come from? Well, it was there. It just got a little funky in the dungeon, if that makes sense. So it helped you. The shadow helped you grow up by keeping a lid on things. And by the way, a culture without a shadow would be super dangerous. Imagine if there was never a container with which to put your instincts, your feelings, your crazy thoughts. It would be kind of dangerous place to move around in, correct? You got to keep a lid on some things. Except after a while, the lid is not very helpful. Or imagine the other end of the extreme, which is the lid is so tight nothing can get out. Then it's going to explode. I started watching a Netflix documentary on feminism. I don't remember the name of it. And in one little part, they showed advertisements from like the 1950s. There's just like a little clip with housewives like dressed in a nice little outfit, like super happy about the dishes and the toaster and all this, the wonderfulness of and this is femininity. That's keeping such a lid on that you know it's going to crack at a certain point. So those two extremes is not a very healthy culture. A healthy culture is probably something like, yes, the shadow develops and help you grow up, but as adults, you start to own it back. So Robert Bly says you spend the first 20 years picking up things that are unsavory or golden and stuffing them into a long black bag that you drag around behind you. And you spend the next 20 or 30 or 40 or 60 trying to retrieve those elements and say, what was that? It's not so easy, all right? So that's maybe a healthier culture where it's going to happen. You can't live without it, but you begin to retrieve. Robert Bly calls it eating the shadow. Not only do you have to take it out and say, there it is, you have to eat it. What is the gift in there? What do I have to own back and face? And you begin to eat it. And it takes a while to eat the shadow. It's not like, we're not talking about, doing shots, all right? It's a full meal. It's a slow food movement, all right, eating the shadow. It's going to take a long time. It's like Dine with 9, okay? It's like an insider joke, I guess. Oh, man. Anyway, I'm having fun. I'll give you a personal example to make it personal. So, at a job I had recently, which will remain unnamed, there was one person who everybody agreed was like the super nice person. Just everybody agreed. One thing we know about him, super nice. I could not stand him. Okay? And I may have been a pastor at the time. I know you're not supposed to, but that's a big part of being a pastor. You hate people. You just don't admit it. But he really bothered me, okay? And I started to get clear about what bothered me. And I would say things like, what's true about him is he is not authentic. That's quite an accusation. Now, I wouldn't say this to his face because I'm not an idiot, all right? But I started saying he's not authentic. Now, if we start putting this in the realm of projections, it's not necessarily the case that it's completely false. He may have been inauthentic. Aren't we all inauthentic to a certain degree? Yes. But for some reason, it was a charge for me that was kind of irrational. Irrational in the sense of, I really didn't know this person all that well, and I only had to interact with them every once in a while in meetings. We weren't, college roommates and, trying to figure out whose stuff is in the kitchen, No, we're talking about an occasional acquaintance, but it was a fiery charge. Until I started realizing very slowly, what was my problem? Take a wild guess. Had something to do with authenticity. And he became a mirror for my own inauthenticity. And until I started dining at that table, or if I didn't dine at that table, it could just remain forever as a projection. He could be the enemy, and I could scapegoat inauthenticity on him. He's the problem. Now you start applying this to your life, and things get like, oh, wait a minute. How many people do I use as a scapegoat? So I don't have to look at this shadowy material that's coming out. Have I made sense? Okay. Okay. I told you I'd give you a line from Jesus. This is so good. By the way, this is one of those teachings. Jesus has like 4 or 5 that if you were to go ask, sort of like, ask the pastor. By the way, there was this show on local PBS called Ask the Pastor. It was the greatest thing you've ever seen. I mean, I would watch it and giggle. And I mean, it's just so absurd that you could call in and they would have a ready-made answer from the Bible for everything. Well, you have to understand, Timmy. And here's the answer. Anyway, I don't know why I thought of that. But there are a few passages, lines from Jesus, that if you ask the pastor, they probably won't know what to say. They'll just look at you like, I have no idea. This is one of them. Here's the line. When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places, obviously, seeking rest and finds none. Then he says, I will return to my house from where I came. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Now, that's only half of it, but let's just hang out here for a minute. So an unclean or evil spirit goes out of someone, roams around in a dry place, says, I'm going to go back home, comes back home and finds the house all tidied up. Jesus is not done. Then he says, then he goes and takes with him 7 other evil spirits, more wicked than himself, and then they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Nobody phoned in on Ask the Pastor, all right? And then he says, so shall it be with this wicked generation. You have to admit, that is good, even if you have no idea what it means. And by the way, this is a much more, my way of putting it, is symbolic culture, the ancient Near East. And Judaism and even Hellenism. Don't think right away they thought, oh, they're talking about a literal evil, little man in there that was like going around. Literalism is a thing of the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Okay? So what was he talking about? Now, I can't help but read this more archetypally, in a more Jungian fashion. So let's say there's a part of yourself, an unclean or evil spirit, that you try to get rid of. I know it comes out. Let's say it's something like something comes out of the black bag. There it is. I know what I'll do. I'll get rid of this thing. And I'll sweep and put my house in order. And I can say to myself, now, the one thing that I know about myself is I've dealt with my anger. I sent it away. It's never coming back. My house is tidy. It's clean. It's put in order. I even swept it. Meanwhile, this funky thing is wandering around in the desert, getting thirsty. This angry part of yourself, or this you fill in the blank, it's getting thirsty. It's like, I want to go back home. But because it's been pushed away, it says, I'm going to get my friends. And we're going to go back home and we're going to wreak havoc. That's what happens when you start treating even your own shadow as the enemy. That's why Robert Bly calls it eating the shadow. When the funky parts of ourself start to come out of hiding, we don't send them away into the desert, never to return. It just doesn't work. And any psychotherapist will tell you that. That's why if you just go to a weekend workshop on fill in the blank, and you're like, I did it. I dealt with my parental wounds. Just one weekend only cost me $500. 6 months later, you're back in the hole, and it's worse than ever. Do you know what I'm talking about? Anybody? Okay? This is the sort of thing that I think Jesus is hinting around about. The reason why I'm saying that is because right now we have the Western psyche and America has an enormous collective shadow. And all the polarization and all the separation and all the us versus them, it's huge. And it has to be dealt with. It does. We have to start collectively looking at the things that we push away, the people groups that we push away, the people we don't want on our borders, the enemies on the other side of the globe. Now the globe is getting smaller and smaller. Saying they are the problem. Doesn't matter if the right or left. You can pick your they, by the way. Trying to keep all this stuff at bay and scapegoat them and the other. We have to deal with this. But how, right? And that's another talk for another time. And in some ways I would say, I don't know. I don't know. But on the personal level, we have to begin owning our own disowned parts, our own shadowy material. The ways in which we play the same game that we blame the Trump administration for. We do. We just choose different others. So you have to start doing a little bit of introspection. And don't think for a moment you can get your house 100% swept and clean and in order. Does that make sense? So what am I talking about? I'm talking about some humiliation. A good, fat, dose of humility. Like when I realized, wait a minute, I am the inauthentic one at this table, not so-and-so. Do you think I was jumping for joy? No, I was like, how, for the last 3 years, I've treated this person this way. I've talked about this person behind their back. I've journaled about this person. I've created whole campaigns, underground campaigns to get rid of this person. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to get rid of this unowned part. Either I'm going to step forward in more authenticity or not, in my example. So, a little bit on shadow hunting. Shadow hunting. How would we get on the follow the breadcrumbs? Just to end, just to get things sort of stirred up. A simple invitation would be to pay attention to your charges. The strong charges. Golden or sinister. The golden ones are actually harder to own than the sinister ones, because the sinister ones, part of our Western, especially West Michigan niceness doesn't like sinister things. So if they start coming out, we want to like look at them, right? But the golden ones are even harder. You mean I'm to be the artist that I'm currently worshiping? Yes. Not in the same way. You can't be Taylor Swift. But the way in which you move in the world, something else might be asked of you. So this is what I mean. The invitation to pay attention to your strong charges. To feel that charge around that person or that other. And it could be someone on television. That's a pretty easy place to start. But try to think more locally. Where's the strong charge here? And if I were to make a list and say that for sure, I know that person is fill in the blank. Don't worry about yourself. Just make it about them. I know they are like this and like this and like this. And don't automatically assume you're naming your own shadow, but just name it about them and start to chew on that. In my life, have I ever been like fill in the blank? Have I ever acted like this? Is it possible that's one reason why I'm so bothered by so-and-so? Have I ever behaved like that? Doesn't mean it's necessarily the case. But to have the courage to do some of that inner work, I'm telling you, if you and I don't begin to chew on our own shadowy bits, we leave a wake of destruction in our wake. We leave a wake in our wake. Part of the invitation of growing up is eating some of those parts. It makes the world much less divisive, by the way, and a lot more humbling. We're just dealing with human beings at the end of the day that have shadowy bits just like me. Am I making sense? It's part of how I see the invitation. The other invitation would be on October 31st, dress up like somebody that really bothers you and see what that feels like in the body. You think I'm making this up? This could be a total depth psychology, Jungian archetypal Halloween if you want it to be. Okay? What does it feel like in the body to be a murderer, a zombie, half dead, half awake, a vampire? What are these beings? What are the energetic qualities of these beings that I'm attracted to? So think about it as a charge. Don't just pick something on a list. I'm really actually asking you to dress up. I'm going to wear this. But to say, what is it that makes me repulsed or attracted, both of which are a strong charge, repulsion or attraction, and what is this charge about? How might it be just a tiny window into these parts about myself that are in the black bag? Okay? All right, let's end with a little line here. Mankind owns 4 things that are no good at sea. This is the greatest to me. Rudder, anchor, and oars, and the fear of going down. This kind of work is about going down, not going up. Thanks for listening.